spirituality is not some kind of external or out there concept. Spirituality always relates back to the most fundamental aspects of living, as we just discovered here. It relates to our health, to our physical well-being, it relates to our relationships, to our interaction, to our communication, and our ability to exchange and express ourselves. It relates to our goals in life, it relates to our striving, how we see others, how we see the world that we're in, and how we regard sort of life itself. And with that, spirituality is fundamentally pragmatic. This is what a lot of people forget. This is what I often call the wrong exit. It's the spiritual trap with regarding spirituality as something special or special knowledge, that it has to do with knowing a certain technique, and once you know this technique, then you are more spiritual. We know that's not true. Welcome everybody to our energy talk on Wednesdays here at Skype Live. My name is Jona Bryndis. I'm an energy healer, energy coach, and visionary. And we come together here, composed of people from all over the world, to talk about energies and the things that are sometimes difficult to articulate or talk about with our friends. If church and a new age aren't really the place for you, and you have noticed that you perceive energies maybe in a different way, then you may find some interesting snippets here that help you to contextualize what you're experiencing. And this is what connects us all. This is why we come together here. We also do online meditations on the same channel. We do energy prayers and energy forecasts. So this is the place where we can openly speak and share about those spiritual and energetic things in life. And today I would like to talk to you guys about spiritual expression in the sense of what makes us spiritual. And many of you are already past wearing white robes and sort of flashing the sage sticks and carrying the crystals around with you. Not that there's anything wrong with those tools, they really do help in many ways, but let's investigate the deeper aspects of spirituality and why we even want to be spiritual in the first place. Or better say, what defines being spiritual in our today's world. And this is something that I would like to throw right at you. You can type here in the chat or speak directly into the microphone. What defines being spiritual for you? How can you, for example, identify if another person is somewhat spiritual, or if there is something like the same wavelength, or if you guys sort of can talk openly? How do you know this? What do you look for in other people? I'd be curious to hear this from you. How do you know if other people are, well, spiritual? And if so, how do you differentiate the different spiritual expressions? There's obviously different understandings of what being spiritual means. So what are your experiences here? Who would like to share?
Hey, Jona, this is Sheila.
Hi.
Hi. I think this is a cool question, actually, because it is, to me, dependent upon the definition of spiritual. And then to define whether someone else I could talk to about that is really a sense of what I sense about them, being open enough about it. So I don't know how you describe that except for it's a feeling. That you can get a sense of whether someone's open enough to have those conversations or whether they're not. I don't know if that necessarily defines somebody as spiritual or not, but I mean, to me, it's maybe they're on the same spiritual wavelength that I'm on, is what I can feel, or whether they're not.
I like how you say that. It's about openness, right? And
yes,
it's a feeling. So these two things we can already sort of bank on our list what defines it. But as you've noticed, there's different ways how people define spirituality. Now, Sheila, for you, for those of us who have been around for a while, how do you feel that? Is it a matter of vocabulary?
A little, but not necessarily. There's a lot of people that I think seek a spiritual connection that don't know how to have conversations about it because they don't have a vocabulary, but they're open to at least dialoguing. Maybe that's where the prophets or the people that used to sit around and not prophesize, but just talk about this stuff out loud with each other, just to talk. They didn't know maybe a for sure answer. They were just willing to talk about it and learn from each other. And I think, to me, I don't know that they have to have the same vocabulary, but eventually maybe work on some similar language, but that takes communication and that openness.
Yeah, I love how you helped to narrow this down a little bit, and it's very neutral how you do this. So it's about openness and a willingness to share and a willingness to communicate. It's not really about content, right? So, I mean, there is an element of vocabulary that allows us, to create a context, right? So, for example, some people, and this is especially here in the United States, equate spirituality with religion, with religious affiliation. This is not necessarily the case in other languages. There's other languages sometimes have different vocabulary, for being religious and being spiritual. So when we talk about spirituality here, we are referring to something that is a sort of modern spirituality, right? That's not necessarily tied to religion or a specific school of thought, right? We are referring to something that is feeling based and that has to do with part of being human, right? Part of kind of a desire or a need to share about these things. And to help out a little bit, we often call this deeper. But all these things that you just mentioned, they could also just be seen as the really cool social emotional skills, right? I mean, really what I hear you say is that spiritual for you means people who are willing to communicate, to share, to be open, neutral in a way, listen, don't have too many judgments right away, are aware maybe of where their own opinions are, and can have a good exchange about these things, like the deeper things of life, say, not necessarily politics, but what it means to be in a relationship, or what it means to be a parent, or what it means to be someone who struggles with marriage or money or job and so forth, right? So we're actually, when we are talking about spiritual expressions, we're not really talking about anything in particular. We are actually talking about aspects of life that have to do with deeper forms of connection and exchange. Isn't that? And when I write articles, or when I, create sessions, that are supposed to help people to heal these aspects or self-heal these aspects in life, I often run into issues with, how to actually name this. Because healing as such is also part of this vocabulary confusion. And so is love, and so is happiness, and even peace. Those are all words that, trigger different things in each and every one of us. But without using the word spiritual, we really can't define them, even in psychology. Yeah. So psychology has created the word mindfulness to signify that it's a different category and not necessarily religious in nature, but hasn't really provided us with, something that we would be able to call, or use as defining ourselves as someone who is maybe, interested in the deeper things in life, in life itself. I guess in the old days, philosophy, calling oneself being philosophical would have probably, described this the best. Yeah. So for most of us, being spiritual actually means to be willing and to make an effort to connect with the deeper aspects of being human. And obviously, when it comes to being human, connecting with other humans, the whole sort of connection business, if you will, and that's where the social emotional skills come in, plays a major role in trying to understand ourselves as humans and trying to understand each other. Yes, Matthew, you were asked by a stranger yesterday to define yourself, and that's the problem, right? We kind of stumble there because we don't really have a good word. In the old days, they had words for this. They would call them a sage or a scholar or a monk or a priest, or these kind of terms. They don't fit anymore, though. Yes, Annette, you think that there's a word missing, like I do. Yeah, spiritual seeker seems to be the closest. Personally, in my writings, I often refer to us as spiritually or energetically aware people. Yeah, also to avoid the word woke, because woke too has been hijacked. And when it comes to finding expressions, guys, I really want you to become aware of this. There can be problems if certain words or certain, say, behaviors are preoccupied, or if they are hijacked. Yeah, think about what most people associate with being spiritual. Yeah, there's confusions there, right? Some people feel these old words, as Annette calls them here in the chat, they tend to make something more special. Do you guys believe that being a conscious person who is seeking for higher expressions in life, for deeper connection, for more wisdom, for more harmony, more love, more truth in their life, actually classifies you as a spiritual person? I think it's time for us to become a little more confident in this and find our own word for this, because it's not really spiritual what it is that we are seeking. What it is that we are seeking is actually very human. We're seeking more. We want more out of our life. It's nothing special, exactly, Annette. Yes, I like it, Janet. You say it's really our original state. We're seeking understanding, yes, and I want to come back to that, Janet, because understanding has a lot to do with, being able to see truth and also to discern for oneself, whom we want to be in this life. Sheila is sharing, what I'm seeking in this way is something that leads me to more feelings of being spiritual. Yeah, it's hard to use the same definition in the definition, but it's a feeling thing, right? And it's about having a deeper understanding about what it means to be human. It sounds a bit ominous when you say it that way, but this is really what it is for me. Yeah, I don't belong to any particular church. I am not propagating any particular esoteric or mystical school. I am not teaching, things that make you special or that only I can do, where you need to be, dependent on me to make sense of things. I'm not schooling you in any way. I am asking you questions. I am training you, and this training, that's why I'm also calling myself energy coach, has to do with a certain way of thinking, a certain way of perceiving, a certain way of feeling, and a certain way of expressing. And I never suggest that we have to do it in this or that way, right? Because that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for more rules. We are actually looking for a better understanding of ourselves. And that's what this hardware training or energy awareness training really is about. It's about to understand ourselves better so that we can make more sense of, the world and other people, our relationships, and form a better roadmap for navigating through our life. We're actually seekers of wanting to understand life and wanting to bring it to the max, right? Wanting to find the best ways for us to live our life and to bring that which we are into expression. So you often hear me use these phrases, seeking higher expressions, because that's the most neutral way for me to express, that there are these dualities in life and that there are always higher and lower ways or higher and lower expressions of one and the same thing. But this is exactly, in my view, what spirituality is. Spirituality looks beyond the rules, looks beyond the programs, looks beyond, just the habits and the conditioned ways. It looks behind things, expressions, even thoughts and emotions, values and mindsets, from a standpoint of whether or not this is the highest expression that we can show up as or with. It looks at it from a perspective of growth, from a perspective of expansion and improvement. But here too, and those of you who are a little older know that there is a potential trap there for our ego. A lot of people who have been around for a while have experienced this, that spirituality can also become a trap for performing. This whole sort of ascension idea, this whole idea of certain levels, operating on certain levels and wanting to ascend to the next level, 4D, 5D, all these things. Those are all still ego terms, guys. Because if we see our own life and our own sort of desire to improve, we cannot really measure this with others. We cannot compare or compete. This isn't an external process. That's an inside job. It is something that we need to answer for ourselves. So in the end, when it comes to spiritual expression, and if you have actually made the effort to think this and feel this through, we can come to the conclusion that what is commonly called spiritual is actually just a way of conscious living, more conscious living, higher vibratory living, as I sometimes call it in energy lingo, finding the higher expression, finding more truth, more love, and more freedom. Something that connects us all, but something that still needs to be trained, because the majority of our life is not really geared towards the highest expression. And why is that? What's in the way here? Why do we even run into conflicts with ourselves? What's the counterpart to the higher expression, the higher route, the more conscious way of living? Yes, absolutely. Ego. Let's just, bring this back into awareness. Why is that? Isn't the ego there to, increase our survival, to help us survive? Why is the ego resisting our spirituality or our desire for a higher expression, for more love, more truth, and more freedom? This is an extremely important question, and as soon as you can answer that for yourself, you are on your way to actually becoming able to discern truth. Well, yes, that's correct, Annette. First and foremost, ego doesn't like change. Why is that? Because it rocks the boat, right? It brings turmoil into our life, and it also kind of opens up the way for the unknown. The new, from our ego's perspective, is always seen as an unknown. An unknown always triggers the fear of what ifs and what is next, the fear of the unknown. Yes, there's also programming that interferes with our connection to spirit or our seeking to deeper connection. Yes, can you guys name a few examples just so that we're all on the same page here? Yes, some of these programmings are, Sheila, you're saying it, primal. They're like coded into our instincts, that have to do with just simple survival. So our actual instincts sometimes work against us. They're part of our ego. And some of them have to do with, like lust, desire, greed, like what the religion is maybe calling sins. Our temptations. The temptations are always the temptations into the lower expression. What else? Why is the ego essentially working against our attempts for a more conscious and more spiritual expression in life? It has a lot of judgments, that's right. It tends to see things as black and white, right and wrong, and that does not leave a lot of space for growth, is it? Yes, and ultimately, you're right, Sheila. The ego always, and this is the reason why the ego has these sort of binary terms, in pertaining life, it always fears that it will die. It constantly has to deal with the fear of no longer existing. Yes, and there are many more programs that we can uncover, that come with, allowing our ego to run our lives, that also have to do obviously with circumstances, with trauma, and some of it with, our understanding of karma and how things kind of inherit from one lifetime to the next, or even within generations. There can even be collective aspects, what is allowed in your ethnic group or your cultural group and so forth, things that you've been conditioned with. So there are many social, psychological, and instinctual, even physiological barriers to wanting to break out of the mold, to wanting to grow. And guys, this is what you need to understand when it comes to fully understanding what being spiritual actually means. It fundamentally means that you want to strive for something higher, something that connects you deeper. We had the words here, connected with divine consciousness or spirit, okay? And that's why we still call it spirituality. But it has to become very, very clear to us that spirituality is not some kind of external or out there concept. Spirituality always relates back to the most fundamental aspects of living, as we just discovered here. It relates to our health, to our physical well-being. It relates to our relationships, to our interaction, to our communication, and our ability to exchange and express ourselves. It relates to our goals in life. It relates to our striving, how we see others, how we see the world that we're in, and how we regard sort of life itself. And with that, spirituality is fundamentally pragmatic. This is what a lot of people forget. This is what I often call the wrong exit. It's the spiritual trap with regarding spirituality as something special or special knowledge, like esoterics have done, and even the churches, that it has to do with knowing a certain technique, and once you know this technique, then you are more spiritual. We know that's not true. Being spiritual and our daily spiritual expressions, where do they truly show, guys? Where do they show? Don't they show in the way we interact with another? In our attitudes toward life? In our ability to love? In our ability to be unconditional and mutual? In our ability to serve others, to be there for others, to connect deeper? In our ability to make peace with things? In our ability to not judge others just based on, their perception at the moment? Yes. And when you boil it down to these kind of abilities, you'll see that these are all things that remind us of religious teachings. So religion isn't off here. Religion and spirituality aren't really separate, and science isn't really separate either, because if you look at psychology, if you look at sociology, if you look at philosophy, you'll find that our social skills, our ability to feel for another, our empathy, our willingness to be open, our willingness to collaborate, are the markers of making us successful as humans. They are the markers for happiness. And so some call spirituality, the seeking for happiness. And that's actually quite true. except for that the definition of happiness is missing. And that's where our ego interferes, because our ego will tell us that just have a lot of money, have a lot of friends, have a great job with a great business card, just, be pretty, or, have a big house and you'll be happy, right? Or sometimes it comes to us in the opposite way. Oh, if I only had more money, if I only had a partner, if I only had a bigger house, if I only had this or that, I would be happy. We still have a lot of work to do here, guys. Okay? But the bottom line is, for me, as, I guess, spiritual teacher or coach, it's all about how we integrate and how we express our deeper understanding and our deeper willingness, to confront our ego. For me, someone who is not afraid of facing their own ego resistance, and someone who is willing to work with all these patterns and programs and conditionings and even trauma, is a spiritual person. Because I know that in order to have more love, more happiness, more truth, more peace, and more freedom in life, you need to first and foremost understand yourself better. And that then shows in your daily choices, because it allows you to make more conscious choices in life, and it protects you from all those common traps and mind control and collective, hypnosis, mass hypnosis, and so forth. Yes. So this is the contemplation of the day here for you in this energy talk. I hope that it inspired you to maybe look at things in a different way, perhaps shift your perception, question some of your pre-programmed or conditioned mindsets around spirituality, and perhaps even made you more curious about how such a training could look like. As you know, or maybe not, I do free initial energy coaching sessions, and there we can explore what it actually is that you are seeking for together and work out a plan, a new roadmap on how to get to know yourself better so that you can make more conscious and perhaps also more spiritual choices in life. Until we see each other again for either the energy prayer or energy update, I am wishing you a very spiritual day today with lots of higher expressions. Bye-bye. Thank you for coming.